Just 3 days ago, I got a call from the police. My father, Arthur, had been arrested. Not for the embezzlement, not for the identity theft we'd just uncovered, no. He was arrested for trying to hire someone to scare me into dropping my cooperation with the authorities. Apparently, he approached a former employee with a criminal record, offered them $5,000 to send a message to me. The phrasing was vague, the police said, but the implication was clear enough. Luckily, that employee recorded the conversation and went straight to the cops. My brother, Ethan, called me right after he heard. He was in shock, just struggling to reconcile the father he thought he knew with a man who would do something like that. He asked if he could come stay with me for a few days. I told him I was already staying with our mother, Sarah, and her husband, David. There was this long, pregnant pause, and then he asked, almost hesitantly, if the invitation would extend to him as well. I checked with Sarah, and she didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said. "Tell him he's welcome as long as he needs." It was surreal, seeing Ethan walk into Sarah and David's house for the first time in over a decade. He was so uncomfortable at first, barely making eye contact. But they just gave him space, not pushing for emotional reunions or apologies. Sarah simply showed him to the guest room, told him meal times, and said he was welcome. Just weeks before that call from the police, I would have defended Arthur to the death. I would have sworn he was a good man, a victim of circumstance, a loving father who fought tirelessly for his children. For 28 years, my father carefully constructed that narrative. He painted our mother, Sarah, as the villain in our story. As this heartless woman who abandoned us for a richer man and then used her new husband's money to buy the legal system and keep us from him. "If only I had money like them," he'd lament. "If only the courts weren't corrupt. If only your mother hadn't poisoned everyone against me." He'd claim he'd been fighting for us in court for over a decade, but the system was rigged. Growing up, we only saw Sarah on court-mandated visitations. Those weekends at her house with David were always tense. Arthur would grill us when we got back. "What did they say about me? Did they try to turn you against me?" He'd remind us that they were trying to erase him from our lives, that they thought they were better than us. My brother Ethan, my sister Olivia, and we grew up resenting Sarah and David. We believed they were keeping us from our real parent, the one who truly loved us. The narrative Arthur built was so strong that as we got older, we started refusing visitations. By the time I was 15, I barely spoke to Sarah. When I graduated high school, I didn't even want her there. Ethan was worse, he hasn't spoken to her in almost 12 years. Olivia maintained minimal contact, mostly out of a sense of obligation. Sarah would try to reach out, sending birthday cards, Christmas gifts, but Arthur would either intercept them or tell us they were just attempts to buy our love. Any affection from her was twisted into some manipulative plot. She'd call sometimes, and Arthur would mutter that the witch is calling again, so we'd ignore it. I remember seeing her cry once when she came to pick us up and Ethan refused to go. Arthur just stood there, arms crossed, saying, "They're old enough to decide who they want to be with." Arthur never remarried. He always said no one could replace our mother, but he'd also add that no woman would want to deal with his situation, fighting a never-ending custody battle against a wealthy opponent. He positioned himself as this martyr, sacrificing his own happiness to fight for us. We believed it all. How could we not? It was the only reality we knew. I moved out at 22 and went to college, which I paid for myself, because Arthur said Sarah and David wouldn't help, despite their money. I maintained a close relationship with Arthur while keeping Sarah at arm's length. I'd see her maybe once or twice a year, and those meetings were always cold and distant on my part. She tried, I'll give her that. She never stopped trying to connect with us. All that changed 3 weeks ago. I was checking my email before work and found a message from an anonymous account. The subject line was, "The truth about your parents' custody battle." I almost deleted it as spam, but curiosity got the better of me. The email contained dozens of scanned court documents from the custody case between my parents, documents I'd never seen before. What I found turned my entire world upside down. The court record showed a completely different story than what Arthur had told us. According to these documents, Arthur had repeatedly violated court orders. He'd failed to bring us to scheduled visitations with Sarah over 40 times in the first 2 years after their divorce. There were police reports where Sarah had called the cops because Arthur wouldn't open the door when she came to pick us up. But what really shook me were the psychological evaluations. As part of the custody proceedings, both parents had undergone evaluations. Sarah's showed her to be stable and concerned primarily with our well-being. Arthur's, however, revealed patterns of manipulation, parental alienation, and emotional harm. The psychologist had specifically noted his tendency to use us as emotional weapons against our mother in a systematic campaign to destroy the children's relationship with their mother. The courts hadn't ruled against Arthur because Sarah had money. They ruled against him because he was actively trying to alienate us from her. The judge's final ruling was damning. It stated that Arthur had engaged in a persistent pattern of parental alienation and that his behavior was psychologically damaging to the children. One document particularly gutted me. It was a letter Sarah's lawyer had submitted to the court, pleading for stricter enforcement of visitation. In it, Sarah described calling our house and hearing Arthur tell us not to pick up because it's just your mother. She described showing up for pickups and watching through the window as Arthur told us to go hide. She described sending birthday gifts that we later told her we never received. The final blow was a psychiatric report from when I was 14. Apparently, I'd been interviewed by a court-appointed psychiatrist without even realizing what it was for. In my interview, I'd repeated Arthur's exact phrases about Sarah, that she abandoned us for a rich man, that she only wanted us when it was convenient, that she bought the judge. The psychiatrist noted that these were not typical expressions for a 14-year-old and concluded I was repeating adult narratives I'd been fed. I called in sick to work and spent the day going through every single document. Then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mom without telling Arthur first. When she answered, I could hear the surprise in her voice. I asked her if we could meet for coffee. She agreed immediately. That coffee meeting lasted 5 hours. I showed her the email and asked if the documents were real. The look on her face, I'll never forget it. It was relief mixed with old pain. She confirmed they were real but said she had no idea who might have sent them to me. She'd never wanted to tell us these things herself because she didn't want to put us in the middle or make us feel like we had to choose sides, even though Arthur had done exactly that our entire lives. She told me things I'd never known. How she'd drive to our school events and watch from a distance because Arthur had threatened to make a scene if she approached us. How she'd send child support payments well above what the court required, hoping the extra money would give us better opportunities. How she'd kept a journal for each of us, writing entries on our birthdays and other important days, saving them for when we might want them someday. When I asked about the money, about her buying the judge as Arthur had always claimed, she pulled out her phone and showed me her bank records. She and David are comfortable, sure, but nowhere near as wealthy as Arthur had made them out to be. David works in insurance, and Sarah is a school administrator. They have a nice house in a good neighborhood in Denver, but they're not rolling in money like Arthur had us believe. After that meeting, I went home and pulled out all the boxes of my childhood stuff. Among them was a shoebox where I'd kept the few cards and letters from Sarah that I'd managed to get before Arthur could intercept them. Reading them now, as an adult who knew the truth, was heartbreaking. They weren't the manipulative messages Arthur had characterized them as. They were a mother desperately trying to maintain a connection with children who were being turned against her. I've spent the last 3 weeks in a daze, re-examining every memory, every story, every interaction through this new lens. I realized that even the narrative about why they divorced was probably a lie. Arthur always said Sarah left him for a richer man, but the court documents showed she'd filed for divorce, citing emotional mistreatment. The timeline also didn't match Arthur's story. She didn't start dating David until almost a year after the divorce was finalized. I've had several more meetings with Sarah since then. I've learned that she set up college funds for all 3 of us, which Arthur never told us about and apparently withdrew money from, which led to another court battle. Then, yesterday, I got another anonymous email. This one contained police reports from last year that showed Arthur was currently under investigation for embezzlement at his company. Apparently, this investigation had been going on for months, but he never mentioned it to any of us. According to the reports, there was substantial evidence against him, and charges were likely to be filed soon. This was the crossroads. The prosecutor handling Arthur's case reached out to me through Sarah. They contacted her looking for potential character witnesses. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify about his history of manipulation and deception. Part of me felt like I'd be betraying him, despite everything. He's still my father, and there were good times, too. But another part of me was so angry about the years of lies, about the relationship with Sarah he stole from me. Ethan was still firmly in Arthur's camp. When I tried to talk to him about what I discovered, he accused Sarah of fabricating the documents and me of betraying the family. Olivia was more receptive but still reluctant to completely overturn her view of our parents. The prosecutor explained they weren't looking for me to testify about his character in general, but rather about specific financial matters. Apparently, Arthur had told his employers that he needed to withdraw large sums of money to pay for my medical treatments. I don't have any medical conditions that would require expensive treatment, and I certainly never received any money from him for medical purposes. The prosecutor believed he used my name to embezzle over $200,000 over the past 3 years. After learning this, I decided I would testify if needed. This wasn't about the custody battle anymore. This was about him potentially committing fraud using my name. I couldn't look the other way on that. I also did something I'd been avoiding. I confronted Arthur. I went to his house yesterday, determined to hear his side of the story. I didn't show him the documents immediately. I just asked him to tell me about the custody battle, about why he and Sarah really divorced. I wanted to give him a chance to come clean. He stuck to the same story he's always told. Sarah abandoned us for money, used her resources to turn the courts against him, etc. When I mentioned the embezzlement investigation, he became defensive and said his company was trying to frame him because he knew too much about their own illegal activities. When I finally showed him some of the court documents, he became enraged. He accused me of spying on him, of betraying him just like your mother did. He said the documents were fake, that Sarah had probably created them to turn me against him. The conversation ended with him telling me to leave and not come back until I was ready to be loyal to my real family. I left feeling simultaneously heartbroken and certain that I was making the right decision. Today, I received yet another anonymous email. This one contained bank statements showing transfers from accounts in my name and my siblings' names to Arthur's personal account. The thing is, I never opened these accounts. It appeared Arthur may have been opening accounts in our names and using them for his own purposes for years. I forwarded everything to the prosecutor and contacted my bank to make sure there aren't other accounts in my name I don't know about. I've also started seeing a therapist to help process all of this. She specializes in parental alienation and family trauma. After just one session, she helped me understand that what Arthur did is a recognized form of mistreatment and that my confused feelings, still loving him despite everything, are normal. Sarah has suggested family therapy for those of us willing to participate. And Olivia and I are considering it. We're taking things slow and rebuilding our relationship with her. It's awkward and painful at times, but also healing. Yesterday, she showed me the journals she'd kept for us over the years. Reading her entries from when I was a teenager, when I was at my cruelest to her, was difficult. She wrote about still being proud of my accomplishments, even when I wouldn't let her be part of them. Then, 3 days ago, the situation escalated dramatically. I came home from work to find my apartment in Denver had been broken into. It was ransacked, drawers emptied, furniture overturned. The only things missing were my laptop and the folder where I kept printed copies of all the court documents and financial records. Not my TV, not my jewelry, not even the cash I had in my dresser drawer. I called the police immediately. While the officers were taking my statement, I received a text from an unknown number that just said, "Back off now or worse will happen." I showed this to the police, who took it seriously, especially when I explained the situation with Arthur. They're investigating, but warned me that it might be difficult to prove who was behind the break-in. Feeling unsafe, I packed a bag and went to stay with Sarah and David. It was strange walking into their house as a place of refuge, when for so long I'd seen it as enemy territory. They set up their guest room for me without hesitation and installed a security system with cameras the very next day. David, who I'd vilified in my mind for years, has been incredibly supportive through all of this. The prosecutor working on Arthur's case was alarmed when I told them about the break-in. They've now assigned a victim advocate to work with me and have suggested I consider a restraining order against Arthur. They also informed me that they'd found even more evidence of financial fraud. Apparently, Arthur hadn't just been using my name, but he'd also opened credit cards in Olivia and Ethan's names without their knowledge. I checked my credit report, something I hadn't done in years. What I found was shocking. There were 3 credit cards in my name that I never applied for, all maxed out with over $50,000 in debt combined. There was also a personal loan for $30,000 and a second mortgage on a property I didn't own. My credit score, which should have been excellent based on the accounts I actually managed, was in ruins. I spent an entire day filing fraud reports and contacting credit agencies. The victim advocate helped me through the process and put me in touch with a financial crime specialist who's helping me untangle this mess. It's going to be a long process to clear my credit, but at least I've started. In the midst of all this chaos, something unexpected happened. Olivia received an email from the same anonymous account that had been sending me information. Her email contained different documents, records showing that Arthur had also embezzled money from his previous company 10 years ago, but the case had been settled out of court with a gag order. There were also records of gambling debts at casinos in 3 different states. Olivia shared these with me immediately and decided to take an even bigger step. She moved out of Arthur's house where she'd been living to save money while finishing graduate school. She's temporarily staying with a friend but has already started looking for a permanent place. We decided to confront Ethan one more time, but without Arthur present. We invited him to meet us at a public library, thinking he might feel safer in a neutral public space. To our surprise, he showed up. We didn't immediately bring up Arthur. Instead, Olivia showed him her credit report, which, like mine, showed accounts she never opened. We gently suggested he check his own. He was reluctant, but used one of the library computers to do so. When he saw the results, multiple loans and credit cards in his name that he knew nothing about, something changed in his expression. He didn't say much, but he took copies of some of the documents we'd brought and said he needed time to think. Yesterday, the anonymous emailer revealed themselves to me. It turns out to be Arthur's administrative assistant from work, a woman named Jessica, who has worked for him for the past 5 years. She reached out directly, saying she couldn't stay anonymous anymore given how serious the situation had become. She explained that she'd discovered Arthur's fraudulent activities while preparing reports for the company's annual audit. When she confronted him about it, he threatened her job and implied he would make trouble for her family if she reported him. Jessica had kept quiet at first, but continued to collect evidence. When she learned he was using his children's identities for fraud, she felt she had to do something. She found our contact information in Arthur's files and decided to send the court documents first, thinking we should know the truth about our parents before learning about the financial crimes. She's now working with the prosecutor's office as well. With all this new information, Olivia and I decided to formally press charges for identity theft against Arthur. We're hoping Ethan will join us, but we're giving him space to process everything at his own pace. Sarah has been a rock through all of this, despite the fact that these revelations must be bringing up painful memories for her, too. She's respected our need to work through our feelings about Arthur without demonizing him to us, even now. Yesterday, she told me something that stuck with me: your father wasn't always this way. He was a good man once, but something broke in him. That doesn't excuse what he did to you kids or to me. But I hope someday you can separate the father you needed from the man he became. The prosecutor believes they'll be filing additional charges against Arthur for witness intimidation based on the break-in and threatening text. They've advised all of us to be careful and document any contact from him. So, that brings us back to Ethan, walking into Sarah's house for the first time in a decade. That night, the three of us siblings stayed up late, talking in Ethan's room. He admitted that he'd been having doubts about Arthur's version of events for years, but had pushed them aside out of loyalty. He told us about things Arthur had said to him when we weren't around. How Ethan was the only loyal one, how he was better than his sisters who were too easily influenced by their mother. The manipulation was even deeper than I'd realized. Ethan decided to check his credit report, too, and as we expected, found numerous fraudulent accounts. The three of us spent the next day working with the financial crime specialist, filing reports, and adding our names to the growing case against Arthur. The prosecutor has informed us that with the new charges of solicitation of assault, Arthur is being held without bail as a potential danger to witnesses. The embezzlement and identity theft cases are proceeding with additional evidence coming from the company's internal investigation. They've discovered that the fraud goes back at least 5 years and involves over $800,000, far more than initially thought. Yesterday, we had our first family therapy session. It was just me, Olivia, Ethan, Sarah, and the therapist. David gave us space for this initial meeting. It was emotionally exhausting, but also cathartic. Ethan apologized to Sarah for his years of coldness, and she, as always, assured him it wasn't his fault. The therapist helped us understand that we'd all been victims of parental alienation, and that the guilt many of us feel for believing Arthur, for treating Sarah poorly, for not seeing the truth sooner, is common in cases like ours. After the session, David joined us for dinner. Watching him interact with Sarah, I saw something I'd been blind to all these years. They genuinely love and respect each other. He's patient and kind, nothing like the villainous character Arthur had painted him to be. He showed Ethan his collection of vintage vinyl records, and they discovered a shared interest in classic rock. It was a small moment, but seeing them connect over something so normal felt like a glimpse into what our family relationships could have been all these years. Sarah pulled out old photo albums after dinner, pictures of us as babies, as toddlers from before the divorce, when things were still good. There were pictures I'd never seen of family vacations, birthdays, normal, happy family moments. For so long, Arthur had controlled our family narrative, even our memories. Seeing these photos was like recovering pieces of a history I didn't know I'd lost. In a bizarre twist, we also learned that Arthur had apparently been maintaining a separate family in another state. Jessica, his assistant, revealed that he regularly took business trips to Nebraska, where he had a long-term girlfriend and a 7-year-old son. None of us had any idea. This woman apparently knew Arthur was divorced, but believed we maintained a close relationship with him, and that we chose to stay in Denver while he split his time between locations for work. She's been contacted by investigators and is understandably devastated. This morning, Arthur's lawyer reached out to each of us. He's trying to negotiate a plea deal and wants us to write letters to the court asking for leniency. Ethan and Olivia both refused immediately. I'm still considering it, not because I want to help Arthur avoid consequences, but because part of me wants the opportunity to express in writing exactly how his actions have affected me. The prosecutor has advised that such a letter could be submitted as a victim impact statement instead, which would allow me to have my say without supporting his plea for reduced charges. Through all of this, the support from Sarah and David has been unwavering. They've opened their home to all 3 of their adult children without hesitation. They've respected our complicated feelings about Arthur, never jumping in with "I told you so" or using this as vindication for themselves. They've paid for the family therapy and offered to help with the legal costs of fixing our credit. David even offered to help Ethan find a job at his company if he needed one. I'm starting to understand that this is what real parental love looks like. Supporting your children even when it's hard. Even when they've rejected you, even when they believe terrible things about you. It's the opposite of what Arthur did, using our love as a weapon and our loyalty as a shield for his own actions. The road ahead is still long. We're all in individual therapy now, in addition to the family sessions. We're working with financial and legal experts to untangle the mess Arthur made of our credit and finances. The court cases will likely take months, if not years, to fully resolve. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm part of a real family. One built on truth and genuine care rather than manipulation and lies. Sarah says we can't get back the years we lost, but we can make the most of the time we have now. And that's what I'm trying to focus on. How do you even begin to process a childhood built on such deliberate lies?